Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Damarco Wyatt. He's a Command Sergeant Major in the U.S. Army. He's a graduate of DeVry University with a degree in supply chain management. Commander, welcome to the program today.
Hey, glad to be here, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hey, look, I know that you're in the U.S. Army, as I've said, but where did you grow up? Where did life begin for you?
So life began for me in Georgia. I'm a native of Conyers, Georgia. I spent a lot of time in Southwest Atlanta, Fulton County, and I finally moved to Eastern Georgia down in Covington.
Oh, okay. All right. So I know that you're in a leadership position now, but I want to roll back in high school. What kinds of activities interest you at the time? What were you drawn to?
So as a youth, I was big on sports. I come from a athletic family. My mom ran track, my dad ran track, my dad played basketball, my mom played softball, my dad played a little bit of baseball. My mom was heavy into softball. So I was just a very physical person and very athletic. So I ran track in high school. I played basketball, a little bit of football, and a little bit of baseball. Mostly sports, though. Anything that could get my adrenaline going and get some good sweat going, I was all for it.
Okay. A lot of kids, have aspirations to becoming a professional athlete. As a kid growing up, were you one of them? Did you want to become a professional athlete?
If I could have done anything, it would have been to run track at the collegiate level.
I see. Okay. So what were some of your aspirations coming out of high school? As a kid, 16 years old, 17, what did you see yourself doing in this life?
To be honest with you, I really didn't have a plan. It was, hey, you're going to go to college and you're going to get an education and you're going to graduate and you're going to work. So I really didn't have any aspirations to do anything. I was still trying to figure a lot of those things out. And I applied for a lot of different schools, but my passion was not school at the time as a 17-year-old kid fresh out of high school.
I got you. So you said you applied to several. So were you a very advanced kid? Were you successful in high school? Don't want to get too personal here, but yeah.
No, that's fine. I got accepted to 5 schools. At the time, they were all four of them were out of state, and the one in-state school that I applied for, I was accepted, and I had a full 4-year scholarship.
Okay,
academic.
All right, so you were a kid who did well in school and obviously did well enough to be accepted by 5 different universities. So, out of high school, you began your education. How did that go for you?
Not so well because I was bored. And I think now being the age that I am now, I kind of know why I was bored. I need constant stimulation. And sitting in a classroom, it wasn't enough. So I foregone that entire 4-year scholarship and I left school my first semester.
That's interesting. So when you left school, Damarco, what did you do? I mean, did you have a plan? Did you?
So again, right? No plan. So if you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. So I went back to my old job. At the time, I was working at a department store by the name of Kmart. You're probably very familiar with Kmart.
Yes.
So went back to Kmart and I was working, I was full-time, 40 hours a week, right? And I saw one of my high school classmates and he came in his uniform and he was squared away. He was very, very, very professional. He was sharp, a term we like to use here in the military. And I was like, hey man, what do you do? And he was like, hey, I'm in the Army and, I'm here for hometown recruiting. I get to come home after all my training for 2 weeks and I get to recruit people to come in the Army. And I was like, really? And the first thing that I asked him, and I said, hey, how much do you get paid? And he told me, and I was like, wow, this guy gets paid way more than I do. I'm going to go join the Army. So that day I left, I got off work about 4:30, 5 o'clock. I went and signed up for the delayed entry program at the local MEP station in Covington, Georgia. And the rest is history.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, your story kind of reminds me of Colin Powell, the general and Secretary, Secretary of State, Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. He wrote in his book that he didn't really know what he wanted to do until he got into the Army. And that's when he discovered something very special. So let me ask you this. How did the Army, or you're currently serving, so how does the Army shape you? What would you say are some of the ways that you have been shaped into the man that you are by your service in the military?
So for me specifically, because I've spent my entire adult life in the military, I was able to grow. The first couple of years were foundational, right? You learn how to be a soldier. You embody the Army values of leader, of the acronym called leadership. Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage, right? So once you start to embody those things, everything that you do, it becomes a lifestyle. So in my early 20s, right, you make mistakes and then you don't repeat those mistakes because you learn them. You learn from those same mistakes. And in your 30s, you start to settle in and things start to get easy. But then you continue to challenge yourself, because a running theme in the military is adult lifelong learning. So that's where the degrees and the education and the self-development comes in, because all of that equals to professional development. And as a leader now, it is your job to continue to adapt to the ever-changing environment. And that's what we do.
I see. And you mentioned leadership and a few other things, but is it fair to say that what you just articulated is the Army ethos, the Army belief system?
The Army values.
Values, okay. All right, so let's look at leadership for a moment then. What have you learned about leadership from your service in the Army?
So you just hit it on the head, right? You just said, what have I learned about leadership based on the service? So that's what it is. It's service to others, right? So as a leader, you have to be a servant leader. That means to serve, right?
Yeah.
It's no longer about me. If I'm a leader, I've been placed in an increased responsibility position to give to others, to teach, to coach, to mentor. So if you put others above yourself, now you become a servant leader. So that's what it means for me to serve, is to take all the knowledge that I have and all the experience that I've gained over the last 25 years and download that into the younger generation of subordinate leaders that are coming behind me.
Wow, that's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that, because I'm well aware of servant leadership, but you're a military man. You're a career man. And look, you've been there for almost 3 decades, and here you are talking about servants. That surprises me. Can you say more about the Army and being a servant leader and what that means to you?
So, it's humbling, right? Because you work so hard to get to a certain place in any career, in any endeavor. But what a lot of people fail to realize is you don't get there by yourself. And in the military, you get there on the backs of others. You're not always doing the hard jobs. You become a manager, a director, and then you start managing the talent that's around you in order to execute missions and get things done the right way. Wow. So as a servant, I owe it to the people under me to train them, to make them understand why the mission is important, to take care of them, to take care of all of their needs, all the emotional, physical, and spiritual needs of a soldier. I owe it to them to lead by example, personal example and professional example. I can't give them a directive or tell them to do something that I'm not willing to do.
That's awesome. So you've touched upon a few things that I want to dig a little deeper on. And once again, some people would be surprised that a military man, you mentioned spiritual. And I want to know, what have you learned about spirituality from your service? What does that mean to you? Because I think people are going to be curious, Command Sergeant Major, that they hear you, military man, would would talk about that. Can you tell us more?
So I think it really boils down to how you were raised, right?
Uh-huh.
And your upbringing, right? So I came from a religious family. My grandmother, my dad, my mom, and my wife as well. And so there's a spiritual background. So there's a history, right? We pray in the morning, we pray at night, we read Bible scriptures, we go to church, we fast. All of those things play into our spirit man. Now, when I talk about the spiritual, emotional, and personal, I never try to put my spiritual beliefs onto anyone else, right? Because everyone is different. But if I lead with that, right? Understanding that my abilities, my power, all the things that I possess are not because of what I've done. It's based on a blessing that I received. And that's how I move. That's a part of my character. And the military focuses on that, right? But they'll never push it on you. But it's something that we have to be very delicate with and treat it as if it were a living and breathing thing, something that's tangible. Right. Because you don't never want to get into a battle where you're having someone to go against their beliefs, because that doesn't really line up with who we are as leaders.
Right. I mean, I see you. I see what you're saying, because, while some individuals may think that to be spiritual and military would not go together, but I can really see from just listening to you how having a sense of faith could perhaps make you even a better soldier. So let me ask you, do you think being a man of faith makes you a better soldier? And if so, why?
I wouldn't say it makes me a better soldier. I think it makes me a better person.
I got you.
Right. So being a leader, one of your attributes of being a leader is your character.
Yeah.
And oftentimes your character has to line up with what you do every single day.
Sure. Whether
somebody's looking or whether somebody's not looking. So if I have a messed up character, if I have character flaws, then it doesn't matter if I have a good spirit about me or not. My character is messed up. So I wouldn't necessarily say having a spiritual background makes you a good soldier. Your character, your commitment, and all of those leader attributes is what makes you a good soldier. I'm a good person based on my character. Therefore, I embody a lot of spiritual beliefs.
Okay, that sounds great. Hey, look, so what have you learned about discipline from your time in the military?
So I'll tell you, right, I was very undisciplined prior to coming in the military, very hard-headed, very stubborn, and didn't have a lot of patience. And part of discipline is having patience, being patient enough to understand a process and trust a system in order to get something done. And discipline has been a cornerstone of my success. Being patient, being consistent, being committed to doing the same thing every single day. And for lack of better terms, religiously, right? I've served the people of the United States favorably and honorably for the last 25 years. Yeah. That within itself is an ultimate mark of discipline, right? Discipline comes from so many different things. Right. Having a degree shows that you had discipline enough to go through a curriculum for 2 years, 4 years, or 8 years, right? Whether you have an associate's, a bachelor's, or a master's degree. That is discipline. It's commitment, right? So the Army taught me, in order for you to do anything, you got to be disciplined enough to do it. And discipline comes from within, having a strong mind. Right. That's great. Okay, so let me roll back. Earlier, you mentioned your military career. And I'm just thinking about young people today, just some young people at any point. They may not see the military as a career, but you see it as a career. Can you tell why is this a career for you? Your military career. So it's an investment. The military invested in me. They sent me to a lot of training. And they said, hey, we're going to put you out in front of soldiers. And I don't think you can do anything like that with 1 foot in the door and 1 foot out of the door. So a lot of people so what is a professional and what is a professional career and all of that stuff? Well, I think anything that you do over 10 years becomes a career because it becomes a part of who you are, right? The military is who I am. Like everything that I do has structure. Why? Because I've been taught that. Everything I do has to have a plan, and it has to be rehearsed, and it has to be executed. And then you got to go back and talk about it. And you do an after action review to make sure that the next time you do the plan, you don't make the same mistakes you made the first time. Right. So all of those things make up who we are and what we do on a daily basis. So my career is, I'm a career soldier, meaning I learn and I keep learning until it's time for me to take the uniform off, and I give back everything that I've learned. I got to give it back to somebody. And that's where the service comes in. And that's where the teaching, the coaching, and the mentoring comes in.
Right. That's incredible. You sound like you could be a professor, actually. Same kind of thing, the same kind of approach. So let me roll back. Now, you're currently a command sergeant major, and we'll get there to see what that means. But let's say when you started let's say that you got off the bus, starting in the military, what's your rank at the very beginning? What's your first rank?
I was an E1, private.
A private, you said?
Private.
Okay. And what was your second rank?
I was a private first class.
Okay. And is there a clear distinction between the two, private and private first class?
Just time in service and pay.
Okay, got you. And what was your third rank?
I was a specialist.
Okay. And your fourth rank?
I was a sergeant.
I see. Now, at what point in your career did you get the feeling, I found my career? Do you recall?
Yeah, absolutely. Once I became a senior non-commissioned officer. So I'm a senior non-commissioned officer now, right? But there's I wouldn't necessarily say a entry level sergeant first, entry level senior NCO position, but it's the first one. So when you become a sergeant first class, meaning your pay is E7, but your rank is sergeant first class. If you look at our Army doctrine, the sergeant first class is the most experienced person in that platoon. It was coined from a German term. He was the platoon daddy because he was the oldest of all the enlisted members in the platoon. So once I became a sergeant first class, that's when I knew this is it. I'm all in.
Wow.
I have to be, because people depend on me now.
About how
that
many
was my
years?
first rank.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So how many years did it take you to reach sergeant first class?
13.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And what came next?
Master sergeant.
Okay. And is there a clear distinction between those two?
Absolutely. So as a master sergeant, you are a master of your craft. You are senior to the sergeant first class. No longer are you in a platoon or labeled a platoon sergeant. You're a master sergeant / first sergeant, meaning first sergeant and master sergeant are the same on as far as the pay scale, but the duties and responsibilities and the scopes are different. I was a first sergeant as well. Now, a first sergeant manages a company. A platoon sergeant manages a platoon. So a platoon could have up to 100 personnel. A company could have up to 300 personnel. So it just depends on what unit, what location, and what type that you manage. But as a first sergeant / master sergeant, you are in charge of way more. The responsibility is higher, and you're more senior to the sergeant first class.
I see. Okay. Now, I find this fascinating, so I want to know. But you are a command sergeant major. Now, let's look at that title. Is there such a thing as command sergeant?
No. There's a sergeant major.
There's a sergeant major.
But not a, so there's two, right? There's a command sergeant major, then there's a sergeant major.
I see. So, what do you do? Tell us about this. What are your responsibilities? Well, I know that there's some things that you may not want to disclose, but give us a snapshot. What does this mean, command sergeant major?
So, okay, so there's levels to everything that we do in the military. The base level for a command sergeant major is a battalion size. A battalion size can range from anywhere between 400 to about 600 packs. Packs meaning personnel.
Mhm.
I was a battalion sergeant major for 2 years. I am currently a brigade command sergeant major. Area responsibility is a lot higher. Personnel goes up. So I had 1,200 people at the battalion. I currently have 6,400 at the brigade.
Mhm.
My title is Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Commander on all things. So basically, I am the right-hand man to a commander, a full bird colonel.
Sounds like a lot of responsibility.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go back into your education a little bit, and this may figure into your work as a command sergeant major. Your work involves logistics. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what does that involve? Logistics. And I think you're also a senior logistician. Did I get that right?
Logistician.
Yeah.
Logistician.
Okay. With the International Society of Logistics. What does all of this mean? And how does it relate to your work, your job in the military?
So logistics, right? So in every company has some form of logistics, because if you sell a product or goods and services, normally you have to transport those goods and services to somewhere. So there's logistics behind that. There's the transportation piece, there's the shipping, there's the receiving, there's the storage, there's the disposition of all things supply, right? But not only that, there's also maintenance. There's also ammunition. There's also anything that deals with material. I'm a logistician. I move it, I plan it, I execute it. You name it, that's what we do. I think the next question you asked me about my degree. So I knew once I became a career soldier that I was going to do supply chain management throughout my entire career as a logistician. So why not get the degree that kind of certifies me as a master logistician?
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
All right. All right. Okay. So now let's look. You've been in the military for, is it 25 years or so?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there a point where they say, hey, Command Sergeant Major Wyatt, you got to go, you're too old? Is there like a cutoff point?
Yeah, 40 years.
40 years, 40 years in the military. So you have a long way to go if you decide to do that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so let's look at, I'm just curious about your vision, your purpose. How do you see the world? How do you see your contribution to the world? What is it that you feel that you want to offer, or I'll put it this way, continue to offer the world? How do you see yourself, your vision, your purpose, what you want to offer?
My vision is to be able to touch as many people as humanly possible. My purpose is to inspire everybody that I come in contact with, whether it's my motivation, whether it's my kindness, whether it's my work ethic, whether it's my wisdom, or whether it's my good conversation and just my character. I want to inspire, motivate, and lead anybody that I come in contact with, given the opportunity.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. So let's look at it from another direction. Who are some of the people, because if you want to inspire, if you want to touch people, if you want to serve, then my assumption is that you've been touched, you've been inspired. So who are some of the people who have touched your life and inspires you, including today, not only the past, but including today?
My dad is one of my biggest inspirations because of his work ethic. He never gives up. He always works hard, and he doesn't complain. So I think I get a lot of that from my dad, and I'm gonna continue to hold him in this light because that's how I see him.
Yeah.
I have a few mentors who lead and direct me in those ways, and I look up to them because I've watched them pave the way for me. A couple of senior sergeant majors who have since then retired, but it doesn't take a lot for me. Like I don't say that because I'm very arrogant. I just say everything that I do Mr. Stephen, comes from within.
Uh-huh.
And I'm being led by something higher than me. And that's how I serve.
Yeah.
It's not about Marco. It's bigger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I look at, and that's how I view the world. I think you asked me that too. That's how I view the world.
Yeah.
It's bigger than me.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I think your father will be pleased that you said what you've just said about him. So was he military? Your father?
He was not.
Okay, all right.
I'm a trailblazer. I'm the only one.
You're the only one in your family. Okay, that's great. That's fantastic. So what do you want to do after your career? Have you looked that far? I mean, I'm not sure if you've looked beyond the military or not.
I think for me, because I'm going to serve as long as possible, I'm not going to get out of the military, retire, and actually take the uniform off and live a normal life and work for someone else. What I'll do is probably do some consulting. My wife wants to open up a gym, so we're definitely going to do that because I want to be able to leave my young kids something behind, right?
Yeah.
I want to leave them something for them to call their own. And it's going to be a gym.
That's great. How many kids you have?
5.
Wow, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, this has certainly been wonderful talking with you. Is there anything else you care to share with us that I have been asked you about your career, about your service, about your vision, about how you see the world? Is there anything else?
I'll tell you, and I think I mentioned this when I first started talking about my path to the military and throughout, but there was a time where I was not going to serve beyond 3 years because I was still in that I don't know what I want to do with my life. But you countered that when you asked me at what point did it change. So if people that are watching and if you didn't know, I never planned on staying in the Army 25 years.
Yeah, but that's huge. I know that I was getting ready to conclude, but want to look at that a little more, because what I hear you say, and tell me if this is about right, is that at one point, you were doing the Army, but at some point the Army got into you. Is that about what you're saying? And if so, how would you explain it getting into you? I'm curious about that because, when I went to college, I only thought I would go to college, but then something got into me. And it's that thing that got into me that I began to pursue. So how did the Army get into you, you think?
So I talk about this all the time. Once you embody the Army values and you really and truly serve, then you don't have any reservations about what you do, and you go where you're told and you do those things. You have an opinion because you don't always have to like it, but right? This is a professional organization, right? So you're never going to get your way. Things are always going to be dysfunctional, but you mitigate that based on who you are as a person and how you learn to adapt to any situation. It doesn't matter because it always could be worse, right? So that's the optimism that always comes out.
Yeah.
No matter what situation I'm in, there's always a blessing or a lesson.
That's wonderful. I like that. I'll have to remember that one. Yeah. So have you ever served as a recruiter for the U.S. Army?
I have not.
Oh gosh, we got to get you out there recruiting. Look, I'm ready to join now. Hey, Command Sergeant Major Wyatt, it has been a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Stephen. It was my honor.
Okay. Well, you have been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Command Sergeant Damarco Wyatt in the U.S. Army. Once again, sir, thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.